Hello and welcome to Stoughton Politics with this guy. I'm your host, Noah Beta-Haron, and I'm very excited today to introduce to you Patrick Roath, who is running for U.S. House Representative in our district, the Massachusetts 8th District, running the Democratic primary against Stephen Lynch. Patrick, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks so much, Noah. Thanks for having me on. Thanks to everyone in Stoughton for tuning in. Look, I've been in this race just a few weeks. This is a 2026 election, so we've got a lot of time. But I've been just getting out there talking about the need for new thinking and for new leadership and for real, genuine leadership on some of the stuff that really matters around here in Greater Boston and South Shore. For me, that starts with things like housing and childcare and healthcare, the things that have just gotten so expensive and make it harder to live around here. I think we can be doing so much more at the federal level, and that's really what I'm about. Kind of give you a little background if you like.
Absolutely.
If that's helpful. My mom's family's South Shore. She was born in Brockton, grew up in Braintree, sort of single mother raised her. And she was on the Cape waiting tables in the 70s when she sort of found her way to IBM because they were hiring women for the first time. Met my dad there, who'd just gotten out of the Army. And that job, they stayed at that company for decades, and that was really their ticket to the middle class. And I say that because that's sort of the background for me, right? And I think that we have lost some of that sense of opportunity and the American dream story that people used to be driven by and that used to be available to people in this country. And so when I was in college and I heard Deval Patrick speak about the need to get back to that and how we could do that in an optimistic way, in a forward-thinking way, I was so driven by that. I got to work with him, joined his campaign, worked in the State House, and since have done a lot of work in Boston as a lawyer, actually, on some of those subjects. Most of my activism was actually in the voting rights space, so did a lot around trying to get more people involved, make our institutions accountable, and also had a day job working at a law firm in Boston. Left all that to launch into this campaign and to talk about the need for new leadership, new thinking, big, bold action on some of the things that really matter. And also, fixing our politics and getting our politics to be more responsive, getting trust back in the system, and really just trying to deliver for working people. So there's a lot there. We'll talk about it, but that's the overall.
That's great. I'm interested in kind of that early work. You say you were an aide in the Patrick administration. What did that work look like? Because I know aide could mean anything. Yeah. It could mean that you were a gopher, or it could mean that you were working deep in the legislative process. So
I would certainly not the latter. I wouldn't overstate it because I was a young man. But when I was I went to college around here, and I had the great opportunity to apply to be a White House intern right when the Obama administration was starting, Obama-Biden administration was starting. So I went down there in the summer of 2009. I was the first White House press intern. Amazing experience. That first taste of government. And really exciting time for our country, exciting time for the Democratic Party. But I knew I wanted to get back to Massachusetts and work for Governor Patrick. And so I kind of found my way back and worked on his re-election campaign as a press person. And in the State House, I worked in the governor's office for about 10 months as a speechwriter, kind of helping the governor prepare remarks and get ready for events. And that really launched, sort of my career in being involved in progressive advocacy in and around Massachusetts and Boston for some time. And then when the governor ran for president, which you might remember, Governor Patrick ran for president in 2020, I took a leave of absence from my job and I set up his whole policy operation and kind of managed that. So over the years, there's been a lot of different roles.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me a little bit about, I know it's just a day job, but could you tell me a little bit about your day job in corporate law?
Yes, well, I actually left the firm some time ago just to launch into this campaign. So I worked at the law firm Ropes & Gray as a litigator. And for me, it was a great job to work with talented colleagues, really intellectually interesting, really high-level practice and rewarding in that way. Great colleagues. I did a lot of pro bono work on the issues that I really cared most about, particularly around voting, right? It was really a platform for me to be involved in the community and use that skill set in that organization to make an impact on the things that I really cared about. So spent a lot of time doing that. And had a great experience, but always knew that I had this itch. I had a passion for public service and for politics. So I always knew I would come back to that world.
Yeah, it was, I tried looking up Ropes & Gray just because I was like, okay, well, it's on his LinkedIn profile. and it's such a big firm that it was like, well, I still don't know what he did. because they have done everything from like helping Novavax and Dunkin' Brands to working with Coke Industries.
Well, Dunkin' Brands, great Canton-based company just around here.
Absolutely.
Did some work with Dunkin'.
But and also mergers and acquisitions for like Goldman Sachs and other Coke affiliated companies, and so it's like, okay, well it gives you a sense of how big the law firm is, but it didn't really give me a great sense of like what you were doing as a litigator for them.
I was, trials and courtrooms and letter writing, investigations, all that kind of stuff. But for me, it was always a lot of it was having a platform to do the work I really wanted to do.
Okay, so it allowed you to do pro bono work, and it allowed you to launch a campaign.
Well, eventually, yeah.
I mean, I have to assume that the money in launching campaigns is not great. So
yeah, right. Well,
so you have to have enough of a savings to go into that.
Pay back the student loans.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Do you still have student loans?
Unfortunately, I do not anymore. We pay them off. Yeah.
That's excellent. Yeah. Okay. I'm interested, if you were elected to this seat in Congress, a lot of people, we talk about what we want for the country, what we want for the state. But as an actual congressman, your sphere of, you get to vote on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But your sphere of influence is fairly limited. And I'm interested in what committee assignments you would request. What kind of work would you want to be doing in Congress?
Yeah, well, first of all, great question. But let's start bigger picture, and I'll kind of get there. I mentioned a couple of priorities I really care about. They are the things that I think are on a lot of people's minds around here, like the cost of housing, the cost of getting decent health care, accessing good childcare, and prohibitive costs of education, right? Going to college is so expensive. I think that's where we need to be laser focused as a party and as a federal government. And there's a lot we could do, right? There's a lot we could do on housing. There's a lot we could do to make healthcare more accessible for people. And so which exact committee that translates to, I'm actually not sure. I need to refresh on some of them. There's a lot of the, as you come in as a new person in the Congress, your actual input on a lot of things might be limited, but man, you've really got a voice. And that's something that you can use it as a platform to influence the party, to influence the way policy is discussed and translated into people's lives. You see some members who are really effective at that. And I think that's increasingly a really important part of the job. Look, a lot of the job is also constituent services, right? Like making sure that people who live around here have what they need. And as we see the current administration take an axe to big parts of the government, take an axe to things like Medicaid, that's going to become even more important, to be an advocate for people, to be standing up for people, and for fighting against the administration, the current administration. So that's a few thoughts, and
Sure.
There's any number of committee assignments that I think would work under that big category. But those are kind of the things I'm focused on.
All right, so you're not like, oh, put me on Ways and Means or whatever.
I don't think that's the way to go about this.
Okay, very good. I've seen some press releases from your campaign, and you've spoken a lot about your opponent, Representative Lynch's votes specifically on the issue of immigration, or I don't know if we can even call it immigration anymore,
right,
considering that ICE has been expanded and weaponized against everyone from American citizens to permanent residents with green cards to people who had been granted asylum. So it's like immigration, right?
Yeah.
But so I'm interested in hearing you talk more about, first off, your what you think we should be doing immigration law-wise.
Yep.
But also what you imagine a congressman's role is when you're not the party in power. Watching these things be implemented against your will, right? How on the spectrum of take the right votes and say the right things to risk arrest and potential imprisonment or indictment, like Representative LaMonica McIver is being has been indicted and is being attacked through the legal process for standing up more actively for immigrants and other people targeted by ICE. Where do you see your role in that?
Yeah. No, great. And I love how you frame it too, right? Because there is the question of immigration reform, and which is so important. Like, we need that. Everybody knows we need that, right? We need a system that works much better, that has a pathway to citizenship for people who have been in this country for a long time, that strengthens, security at the border where appropriate, but is humane and thoughtful and well-resourced, right? And that is what Democrats are offering. That's what I think we need in this country. It's sort of this bipartisan consensus. But there are Republicans that are weaponizing that issue for political gain, that are using ICE to disrupt communities and to terrorize populations and to even terrorize citizens of this country, right? That aren't even really subject to immigration enforcement. That is what we need to be very clear that we are against, that we are standing up against, that we are standing up to. And we're fighting for people's rights, the right to basic due process, right? So you're not being shipped off in a plane to El Salvador or something. That is what they're attacking, and that's what we need to be crystal clear that we are not okay with. And people get that, I think. It's not that we don't want to fix things, it's that we need to make sure that our rights are being protected. Now, that is the basis for my criticism of the incumbent, Congressman Lynch, who voted with the Republicans in January on the Lake and Riley bill, which you might know handed the administration more authority to conduct this deportation campaign, continues to vote on Marjorie Taylor Greene immigration bills, and he joins the Republicans in voting for these, and he abandons most of the Democratic caucus. And to me, I think that I think it comes out of maybe this confusion. It's not about immigration reform. Those bills are Republican messaging bills that are designed to terrorize populations, make it difficult for people to live their lives, and for them to win elections. That's what they're trying to get at. It's not about getting a bipartisan consensus for reform, which is where I think we need to be. So when he takes those votes, I just strenuously disagree. I think it is a misunderstanding of the moment we're in and the threat that the administration's immigration policy poses right now.
Where do you see the role of a congressperson in standing up to that?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not joining the Republicans to do this stuff. That's job number one, right? I mean,
That should be the low-hanging fruit.
In both of those instances, Congressman Lynch was the only member of the Massachusetts delegation to abandon the Democrats and vote the Republicans on this. So that's just the wrong way of doing it. So in a way, your question's easy, because I would not do that. Now, and then what do you do when you're in opposition, right? What should the Democrats be doing right now to show that they're standing up for people and to actually fight for people? I mean, you got to get in there and get messy. You got to get loud. You got to show up. The congressperson from New Jersey, right? You do have to sometimes risk getting in the way. We see what Senator Padilla did in California, right?
Absolutely.
At the press conference. We need to be out there. We need to be gumming up the works, and we need to do that and show people what our alternative is, right? What a humane immigration reform policy could look like, what a serious bipartisan consensus-driven approach to that issue could look like, where we center our values and we respect human beings. So that's the job. I'm not sure that a lot of the Democrats in DC are doing a great job of executing at that, but that's where we need to be taking this. And look, I'm hopeful that come 2026, 2027, we're back in the majority in the Congress too.
Give you a sense of where I come from on this issue, because I had the opportunity some years ago when he was running for president to very briefly ask a question of Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado,
great
because
guy. Yeah.
my wife's family's from New Hampshire, and we were visiting New Hampshire, and they were like, "Oh, hey, all the presidential candidates are here in New Hampshire," and Mike Bennet was speaking at some library, and so we went down. And he did a lot of talking about the failed immigration reform bill last Trump presidency around.
Yep.
And was talking both about the good things in the bill that should have been passed. He was making a point about sort of the Republican hypocrisy on the issue of immigration, saying, hey, we did all this stuff in that bill, and he wanted the campaign issue more than he wanted the
actual result.
Border funding and whatever. But it bothered me that he, sort of waxed rhapsodic about the border funding, the funding for better border control, and all of this, because I come from a background. My family is Jewish on both sides. My great-grandfather tried to immigrate to the United States, was turned away, went back to Germany, and was murdered. his ex-wife, my great-grandmother, she and her sister, they lived in a part of Germany that was near the Dutch border. And at some point, and the borders back then were on the more porous side, and people used to, they'd stop you if you looked like you were really going somewhere. But people were constantly, they'd go over to the park in Holland for or in the Netherlands for a picnic or whatever. And so one day, my great-grandmother and her sister packed their picnic baskets on their bicycles, just wore their summer dresses, put some of the family silver underneath their sandwiches, rode their bikes into Holland and never came back.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so, and my father still has the little kiddish cups that were part of that family silver set because they didn't have to sell all of it somehow. And so my background on this is that porous borders save lives, and having a militarized border is tantamount to sentencing people to death. I always want people to be careful about saying, we need a strong border, but we also need, pathway to citizenship. I'm like, do we need a strong border?
Yeah.
We need a pathway to citizenship. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
How strong does a border really need to be? Why is strong the term we use for borders?
Yeah.
Is there a way to reimagine borders and our whole immigration system in a way that makes it easier to seek asylum and to get asylum? So easy to come here legally if you haven't been convicted of crimes that no one would have to come illegally.
Yeah. Well, the last part, I think that's key, is the asylum system, right? And that's really what you're describing. Someone who's a political refugee with a really genuine good faith case to come to this country. And we've historically played that role. It's been so important in our history, right? Welcoming people who have been abandoned by other countries or persecuted by other countries because of some trait or because of their belonging to an ethnic class or because they're LGBTQ, right? And that is so important, and that's what we need to make sure is preserved. And I think we need to strengthen that system. We need more asylum judges. We need more adjudicators. We need to make sure that people who fit those criteria are able to come across and find a home here, if they meet the other criteria. And I've worked on those cases, right? I've actually practiced in the asylum space, and I think it's super important. So I think that historically is the way that the safety valve, in a way, that we've used to sort of assuage people that, yes, we do have some checks about who comes into the country, but people who meet these criteria, like your grandparents obviously would have, can get in because that's important to us and it's part of our values. And we've lost that, right? And it's not functioning very well. People have lost confidence in our ability to administer it, I think. And I think we need to just really pour resources into it, fix it, and get people's confidence back.
Fantastic. Okay. Second page of notes.
Okay.
So what are some practical changes that you think can be made to laws on a national level, hopefully with bipartisan consensus, that would really improve your constituents' lives?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of incremental bipartisan policy wins that we can do below the surface of giant debates of these big issues that we should actually be trying to get done. I think about housing, right? I'd start there. It's a big issue. We'd probably need a lot of effort and money to get it done, but there's also some stuff we can do around the edges to try and alleviate the burden. When Kamala Harris ran for president, they had this great plan about how they'd build millions more homes across this country. You do it by incentivizing the development to get done, making it easier for first-time home buyers to get that first mortgage, and also incentivizing communities to think more creatively about density and getting things done and built near transit areas, right? I think we could get some of that done in a low-volume, bipartisan way because it's such a problem across the country. It's so evident that we have this issue and we're not accommodating people who want to live in and around a great city like Boston. So I'm actually pretty hopeful that we could get some stuff done on that, and that would really be tangible here, right? If we could fund the building of more homes, we could make it more accessible to people. That would really alleviate a lot of the burden that are on working families that aren't even sure if they can stay around here anymore. So it's so expensive. And healthcare too. Like I think, we've got to get to some kind of universal affordable scheme, but like on the way there's a lot of stuff we could do. We could improve transparency. We could crack down on all these middlemen that are extracting costs in the system, right? Think about like the captured pharmacy benefit managers, right? There's so much more we can do to police that behavior and get people, because even if you have insurance right now, it's not very good, right? Like we could do more on that. Same is true in childcare. We could subsidize the creation of childcare places, and make it easier to comply with state and local laws, so we have more supply of that. There's just, I can keep going, right? Because I'm actually very keen on a lot of this kind of stuff.
Well, I'm really interested in both the side of healthcare policy that is, what do you think can be done in the short term?
Yeah.
But also, let's say that, next year, you in office, but also a whole bunch more Democrats are swept into office, and Democrats have an opportunity to actually craft policy that isn't just messaging bills. What is your view on the kind of healthcare system that we should build? Because I think we need to really consider the fact that by the time we even get to that election, our healthcare system is not going to look the way it does now.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the Republican Congress had just passed a massive bill to absolutely gut Medicaid, absolutely gut the exchanges like the connector, the subsidies that people who don't qualify for Mass Health, which is Massachusetts' Medicaid program, and in case anybody thinks that that you're not on Medicaid, or that we don't have Medicaid here in this state, that's called Mass Health. If you're on Mass Health, you're on Medicaid. I am not shy about saying I am on Mass Health. I am on Medicaid.
Yeah.
My family of 4, is currently receiving Medicaid benefits that we may not have next month, right? And with all the money that has been stolen from those programs in order to give rich people tax cuts, we are at risk of losing even more hospitals than we have already lost thanks to Stewart, right? We are looking at a medical system in danger of outright collapse. And so that being the case, on the tiny little silver lining side, right, there may be more opportunity than in the past to say, well, what should our healthcare system, what should it look like? Not what does it look like, how can we improve this weird kludgy thing that still kind of works, but if that weird kludgy thing is gone, or in such a state of disrepair that you may as well replace it, what would your prescription be?
Yeah, good. No pun intended. And your question stole a bunch of my talking points.
Okay.
But that's okay.
No, that's good. I want to hear that.
Because you got to start with what the Republicans are doing, right? They're actually taking the medical funding away from our local community hospitals through Medicaid and just transferring it to the wealthiest Americans in the form of a tax break, right? That's going to persist for decades now, and it is a really serious challenge. It's a really serious challenge for this region. I mean, we didn't even talk about the funding for the research universities and the entire healthcare economy that exists around Boston that props up a lot of employment in this area. That's a separate challenge, but it's another huge piece of this. So I guess I think about it in the same way. There's so much we could do to improve the system we have now. I've always been interested in the public option expanding to pick up more people, so you have some bedrock fallback plan that would supplement Mass Health or replace Mass Health, or to compete with private plans.
Or would allow people to buy into Mass Health,
exactly,
even if they wouldn't have qualified for Medicaid.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so subsidized at a higher income level. I think that's all important. And then look, I do think we need universal affordable healthcare in some form in this country, right? We're the only developed country that doesn't have that. Whether that looks like Medicare for all, whether that looks like the public option coming to be a larger and larger piece of the healthcare picture, I'm kind of open to it, right? But I think you're thinking about it the right way. We are going to come into having this new space where people are going to be pissed off about the constant medical funding that have permeated their community and the weakness of the insurance plans and the lack of providers in their community, like we've experienced on the South Shore. And I think we'll be open to some exciting ideas. And my prescription is I don't want to drop something in on everyone, but those are my values, right? And like those are the range of options that I think we need to consider.
Yeah, I've been wondering that because there was with the recent hospital closures, there have been people calling for like, hey, why doesn't the state take over the administration of these hospitals?
Right.
Because they're right there, right? Yeah. And you don't have to let them close, right? And that would look maybe less like the single-payer Medicare for all type model that people more frequently talk about than it would like sort of the NHS
or the VA,
socialized, the VA, or one of these other that like directly. Where the government is paying your doctor to take care of you, and there's no middleman, right? We talk about the middleman, right? If your doctor is a state employee, then no middleman involved, right? Yeah. It's one of these things that just every time I see something get worse, every time I see something get defunded, I ask myself, but did it have to be paid for inefficiently, or could, if we were to bring it back, do we have to try to turn back the clock?
Yep.
Or could we make something better in its place?
And just to add one more point to that.
Sure.
The Affordable Care Act, right? 2009, 2010. We got that done. Democrats got that done. A historic expansion of subsidizing the exchange and protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and like really bringing down, actually in the long term, bringing down healthcare costs while providing healthcare to more people. So we've made important progress. We've made steps. We've improved on that, and we've protected it from these Republicans so far. I just gotta say, Congressman Lynch didn't vote for the Affordable Care Act, right? Like we don't have a leader in place right now who is thinking about these issues the right way, that has demonstrated a track record of serious leadership on like maybe the most important domestic issue we have. And that to me is a real abandonment of the purposes of this party, and like a real abandonment of leadership on an issue I think is so important. And that's part of why I'm doing this.
Right. My recollection is that Congressman Lynch did vote for at least some of the Affordable Care Act votes, because there were a lot of them. There was a vote for the House bill, then there was the vote for a reconciliation package, and so on and so forth. And I think he voted for at least one or two of those, but I distinctly remember sort of this gamesmanship around, will I or won't I vote for this thing, when it was we knew that the margins were very slim. There was a very good chance that this guy Bart something or other from I want to say Nebraska, was Bart Simpson. No, that's not it.
That'd be
funny. But no. There was a congressman. He was rallying a handful of representatives to potentially vote against the Affordable Care Act. And here, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Congressman Lynch is saying, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to vote for it."
It's just not the leadership we need.
Yeah.
I find it very disappointing. I think he's changed his mind. He seems to have changed his mind on it, but
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the proponents of the Affordable Care Act were promising the whole time, look, even if it's not totally popular now because people don't know what's in it, once it actually happens and people get used to it, they're going to like it. And you know what?
Lo and behold.
They were right. Lo and behold. And yet they're still trying to snatch as much of it away from us as possible. And it doesn't matter whether it's popular if you have the votes to destroy it. And that's kind of what we're learning this year, is that if you have the Supreme Court on your side, it doesn't matter if the law says something.
There will be consequences. There will be political consequences.
As there should be.
They will incur those.
Yeah.
The bill is coming.
So, okay. Excellent. Okay, I want to ask you a little bit about a topic that is controversial in my world, but might not be in your world, which is the topic of so-called AI, or at least generative AI. These large language models that are used now frequently by the public. They've been made free to people. You can use ChatGPT to cheat on your tests. You can use Grok to say weird, racist, pro-genocide things just for fun.
That's crazy.
Or to dunk on it, they are causing massive ecological damage through their power consumption.
Yeah.
They are, and in my world, in the world of, because I'm a novelist.
I know that, yeah.
So I've published 3 fantasy novels. I've written more. And in my sort of speculative fiction community of sci-fi, fantasy, horror, there is a lot of discussion about just how much plagiarism is involved in the creation of these models. And, so it's like, okay, well, we have something that does significant ecological damage, steals from creators en masse, but on the other hand, it does make a product that doesn't work very well. They're tucked into, I think it was this bill, there was a
moratorium.
Yeah, a moratorium on regulations on the use of AI. That, if I can remember correctly, I think the Senate parliamentarian stripped it out of the bill. I don't think they managed to put it back in, but there is clearly a very strong Republican interest in preventing any kind of accountability for the companies that are producing these products. And I'm interested in your take on that and on how you feel about accountability for these companies.
Yeah, good, great. Well, first of all, I love that you're a novelist. I also love speculative science fiction and fantasy, and epic fantasy in particular, so I'm a huge fan. That's great. And I can see why that motivates a lot of people to get concerned about this technology, right? Because the intellectual property laws that protect creators are jeopardized by a lot of these LLMs and the generative AI model. I guess I'll say I do come to it with a little more optimism, maybe. I'm excited about the promise. I think that maybe, and look, I agree with you. Some of the hype we've seen around these chatbots is probably driven by the people who make them and who are marketing them, for sure. I'd like to hope that there's some useful, socially beneficial things that could come out of this in terms of productivity gains, in terms of unlocking, medical discovery, making it easier. Look, I think of my mom using it to write emails, right? Making it easier for people to actually interact with the world, and helping people who have trouble with that. I think there are use cases that I think are socially valuable. I'd love to see those come online and become more and more a part of our economy and our country. That's not to say I don't have concerns, right? I do. I think the IP question is a big one, and that's going to get worked out probably through the court system in large part, right? We're seeing that now.
I should note that my entire trilogy has been stolen by Facebook and used in their Meta AI.
Really?
You can look at, there's a whole database. You can type in author name. Oh yeah, check that out. All 3 of my books have been used to create this model.
What if you got, it just seems to me like maybe the solution, part of it is just compensation. Right? If you got a check and said, hey, sorry, or we'd like to do this, here's a check, maybe, that's
it's like the eminent domain model of okay, we've stolen your work, but here's some money for it.
Right. Well, some obviously we are still working out how that's all going to work, but I'm super excited to learn more about it and work on it. I think that the Congress has to be paying more attention to it. I think that, frankly, there's a generational gap in the U.S. Congress where the people who are there right now are mostly occupied a certain generation that is not as familiar with some of these tools and products. I'd like to contribute to that. I'd like to learn more, and I do have concerns. I'm hopeful that they'll get worked out over time, and that there is some experimentation, there is some precedent, the companies understand that they have an obligation to creators, and I also think they might just come to realize that they can't hoover up all this protected property and spit it into the model the same way, that there's a different way of training the models that is more protective of rights. I'm certainly aware of it, and it's good to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I have friends who say that small language models are great, actually, right? Who say if you're going to train, do some machine learning to work on a smaller data set that is very specific to what you work on, then it can be helpful in some variety of ways. And I know on the medical side that machine learning has been incredibly useful to in some narrow places, right? For cancer detection, for
folding
proteins. Folding proteins. Absolutely. We don't need to, just because a company will roll out ChatGPT and say, this is what AI is, doesn't mean that everything that had previously been called AI needs to be, thrown away.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That being said, I hope your mom's not using it to write emails and I want to say this to everybody out there, because writing is the process of deciding what you want to say. Everybody knows, everybody who writes in English is familiar with the English language, right? So there's no difficulty in terms of how do I type words, right? The process of writing is a process of deciding what is the thing that I want to be saying, right? And I spend too many hours trying to say the thing I want to say, right? And then you write your draft and you say, this isn't the thing I wanted to say. Or maybe I wanted to say this, but I don't still want to say this, right? And to short circuit that process, to say, write me a condolence email, right, is to say, I don't need to decide what I want to say to my friend whose spouse died, right? Yeah. I don't need to do that intellectual work of deciding what I am, what I'm saying, what I want you to hear, right? So I find on a philosophical level as well as a career level, I find the rollout to ordinary human beings rather than the protein folders to be really disturbing, because people are using it to stop thinking. And it's like, I realize that there are kinds of writing that are extremely mechanical, right? And you're like, I don't want to write a cover letter. Cover letters are boring. The people who read cover letters don't really want to read my cover letter, right? I just want a machine to do it, right? But then you're asking a machine to do it, and then the person on the other end is asking a machine to read it for them, and you're ending up not talking to each other.
Well, I think what you're saying gets at something that I do think about, which is the need to preserve humanity, right? And the human nature of communication, a human contribution that's kind of distinctly human to that kind of interaction. And that is something we're going to have to keep sight of, right? As this stuff gets rolled out more and more. And I think we're going to have to start asking some tough questions of ourselves about what that really means and how much we want to do to preserve it.
Thank you. Okay, I want to ask you a question that I've asked everybody who comes on. It is, I call it the Smackdown, because we are on
Smackdown.
Because we're on
Smack
TV, the Stoughton Media Access Corporation. So here's the Smackdown question. Let's say you're out with friends. I don't know if you drink, but let's say you've had a couple of drinks, and you start ranting to your friends about politics. Right? There's something that you just like. It's an itch you have to scratch. You just have to tell your friends this crazy thing that's been bothering you for months. I want to hear your rant.
Okay. It's hard to know where to start.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, we've talked a little bit about my background working on voting rights issues and democracy issues generally. And my rant, I think in a lot of ways gets to the thing that most concerns me about politics, even putting aside some of the tactile things we've talked about, but the bigger picture stuff, our democracy. Like, what's happening to checks and balances? Like, what the current president is doing to just the rule of law, and the belief that if a judge hands down an order, then that's a valid interpretation of the law that we have to act on. I'm a lawyer, so I see what's happening to the law firms, and I worry about the erosion of norms. And I just worry that apart from the cost of education and healthcare, that we have some real foundational things going on right now that are being undermined and are being eroded in this way that's hard to grasp, hold on to every day, and that's in some ways what worries me more than anything. Like, this American project of democracy that we're all kind of invested in and working on, like, it's not a given. It could go away. And I worry about the country that we are preparing to send on to future generations if the MAGA movement and the president continue to have their way in this place. I just not sure that we'd recognize a lot of the institutions that we now hold so dearly. And I worry about taking it for granted. And if you get a few drinks with me, I'll for sure be talking about that, and that's number one. That's what we have to keep our eye on.
So we have to set the time for me to get some drinks.
Oh, I mean, sure. It's a little early now.
No, you mentioned norms, and I actually want to ask you about that because that's see, I wrote it down right
norms.
here. And norms, because there's been a huge tension in the Democratic coalition between how much do we try to preserve norms versus how much do we fight for our constituents or our principles, right? Because there is this tension, right? Do you try to preserve the environment, let's say, or do you try to preserve the filibuster?
Yeah.
Right? Do you say locking up random people who have committed no crimes and shipping them off to a concentration camp either in Florida or in El Salvador, or shipping them off to South Sudan or some other war zone, just because apparently if we have guns we can. Do you fight as hard as you can against that, or do you preserve decorum? So I'm interested in hearing your take on what norms are sacrosanct and worth preserving, and what norms are really just the politeness of years past that might not have as much of a place in a more pugnacious age.
Yeah, well put. I think that gets on a very important tension that a lot of us are trying to navigate. And I don't know that I have one kind of plop down easy answer. I guess I'll say for myself, I'm someone, a believer in the system that we set up, right? Confidence in the imperfect American project succeeding, constitutionally kind of a norm believer, right? And kind of not a bomb thrower. But I'll tell you, that started to change, right? I've seen just what we've seen in recent years and the lengths to which the Republicans are willing to go to attack and undermine parts of the Constitution and the government. I do think we need to be willing to think outside the box. And that doesn't mean that we ourselves start taking norms and pillars out of the picture. But on the filibuster, I think maybe it's time for that to go. I think that we need to be able to legislate. Part of it is protecting things like our democracy, like we're talking about now. But a lot of it is just the nature of the emergency that we face on some of these issues, like the climate, like the affordability challenges, like what we'll need to pass to make sure that another Trump doesn't get in there and do what he's doing now. Some of those things might require us to rethink some of the norms that we've previously hewed to in response to what they've done.
I've been interested in the question of passing things to prevent another Trump, because it's hard to say, but the founding fathers passed something that should have prevented a Donald Trump, right? So there has been a big push my whole life, or at least, I don't know, I was born in '87, so there's been a push my whole political life ever since I was paying attention. And probably my whole life, but I can't vouch for the stuff that happened when I was 2. To try to legislate our way out of democracy problems. Mm-hmm. When the Supreme Court handed down Citizens United, there was a huge movement to try to pass a constitutional amendment to reverse Citizens United.
Yeah.
And first off, procedurally, that was a dead end. It was always going to be a dead end.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's very hard,
impossible,
right? But it was a 5-4 decision. And the fact that all of this energy on the Democratic side of the political argument went into a particularly difficult procedure when it could have gone into changing the makeup of the court.
Yes.
Right? The fact that we saw something that seemed like a wrong decision, right? It's not a matter of saying, is the Supreme Court legitimate? It's a matter of saying they made a poor choice. And there have been many poor choices made by the Supreme Court. Plessy versus Ferguson was not a great choice, right? Sure. So, but how did it get reversed? It got reversed by a different Supreme Court, right? So you don't always have to legislate when you have people who respect the country in charge of the things, right? In charge of the court, in charge of the legislature, and in the presidency. It worries me when we put too much of our eggs in the basket of let's pass a law, when often our problem is the laws being broken. It's not the laws not being written. It's that someone comes along and says, yeah, but that one doesn't count, right? Yeah. So I kind of worry about focusing too much on what's written.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that what you're getting at is that the complacency that comes with trust that our institutions will take care of themselves. Whereas this democracy has always been about finding the right people, about persuading people, and about mobilizing people to get majorities, to get things done. It's about people actually running for office if they feel like they have something to contribute, right? Which motivates me to do this crazy thing and get involved in this race. And that is how you change the Congress. That's how you change the Supreme Court, is getting people in there who share your values, who are open to persuasion, who have integrity, right, and who are fit for the office. So a lot of it is politics, like it turns out. It's not just kind of like the little boxes on the page and what's on the page, and it really turns out a lot of this is politics. And I think that we're learning that again. We've learned it at different periods of American history, and I think we're learning it again. But part of that is passing laws and getting things done. I do think that part of the phenomenon that you're putting your finger on is Congress abandoning its role as a check against the executive, right? And delegating authority to the executive over the last 50 to 100 years, probably in a way that was that enabled the Trump thing to happen and enabled him to do what he's doing. And I think that part of the thing that we need to do and be thoughtful about is clawing some of that back, and Congress reasserting itself as an institution, right? Not even just a partisan body. I've got some specific thoughts on that, and the checks and balances part of my website, because I care very strongly about it. Yeah. I don't hear enough about it, right? Like I think, and I hope to, if Democrats take back one or both chambers in the midterms, like there is some low-hanging fruit stuff that we could do to say, no, like that law that you're relying on from 1789, that's gone, right? That's off the books now. And at least force him to veto it.
Yeah. I'm interested because you said that you've worked a lot on voting rights and and you're also interested in passing laws as a legislator. So what is your take on ranked choice voting? Because it's something that nearly came to Massachusetts. It's something they have in Maine. It's something that I think only maybe the Democratic primaries in New York have. But we've seen it do interesting things to the politics of the places where it's used. And so first off, actually, why don't I let you describe ranked choice voting and what it means, and then tell me what you think about it.
Yeah, sure. And I'll even go a little bigger, like so much my background. So I was the chair of the board of Common Cause Massachusetts for many years, which is a voting rights advocacy group. And so I did a lot of sort of direct advocacy through that with the legislature. And then, through my kind of pro bono hat at Ropes to Gray or through Common Cause, brought a bunch of lawsuits that also advanced those issues here in Massachusetts. Worked really hard to get automatic voter registration done here. Worked really hard to change some of the rules around getting on the ballot, and we are in a fight to try and get same day election registration done here in Massachusetts. It's not yet, but we're hoping to someday. So this work is just really important to me and motivates me. Ranked choice, yes, we don't have it here. Ranked choice is where instead of just casting one vote, you'd go in, you kind of circle the little button for your one person. You actually rank how many candidates you like, and you sort of rank choice order, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can imagine it, in Boston, we have a city council with lots of candidates. So It allows you to express a preference for more than just one candidate. Right. And then the election administrators work to tabulate those results. And so there's rounds, and your different ranks get counted differently based on the round. Overall, like it's an innovation in elections that I think can do a lot of good. It causes people to create coalitions. We saw that in New York to great effect, right? And it also can allow people who are not the most divisive candidate or represent the most extreme view to kind of come to the top. For example, if they are a lot of people's second choice, but not their first choice. And so we've seen it in a lot of other countries, other states, Maine, I think Alaska has a version of it. It can be really exciting. It does have drawbacks, right? It's difficult to explain. I sort of tried to do it just now. It's a little confusing. Right. Not everybody trusts it. It kind of does lead to some weird dynamics. It's not my top of the list. Like, I like election day registration a lot. I like automatic voter registration a lot. Mail-in voting is very important to me. I think that we need to get more people involved. But look, there's an effort to get it done in Boston. I think that can make a lot of sense. When you have a crowded ballot with lots of people running, it might lead to a healthier dynamic on the city council, for example. Yeah. And in hyper-partisan, purple-y places where you've got, a candidate emerges from the primary really far to usually the right extreme, right? Ranked choice voting could produce a candidate that's more consistent with actually more people's views and bring down the level of partisan rancor nationally, which would be a good thing.
Tell me more about same-day registration and/or automatic voter registration.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have automatic voter registration here in Massachusetts, which is great. So if you, for example, go you have any interaction with the state whatsoever, if you're on Mass Health or you go to the RMV to get your driver's license, then unless you opt out, you will be automatically registered to vote based on the address you provide if you're a citizen and you're above the age of 18. So that just makes it easier than having to take this sort of arbitrary step of like finding your town registrar and going online before the election cutoff date, which is usually 2 or 3 weeks before the election itself when people are just starting to pay attention. So it makes it a lot easier for people to participate. It really happens on the back end. It's worked fairly well here. A lot more people now are registered just as a right, basically, which is a good thing. But we still have those people who find out about the election when there's only 2 weeks or so to go, are really excited to participate, and they show up on election day, and the person at the election booth says, "Sorry, you're not registered," and it's too late to register now. And that really disenfranchises a lot of people, students, people who move, people who change their last name because they got married, for example, right? So a lot of other states, 18 plus DC, I think now, have solved that by just allowing you to do it right there on the spot. It's not that complicated. You kind of prove whatever you need to prove. Usually there's not much there.
My understanding is that voter registration didn't even exist until Jim Crow, right?
That's right. Yeah, it does have a legacy.
You don't need it.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. So anyway, it would make it a lot easier, and it would actually solve a lot of administrative headaches for people. In a lot of states, New Hampshire has it, right next door. Yeah. So we've been trying to get that done for a long time here in Massachusetts. I hope we do still.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Because I talk to my friends about the exciting things in my life, like getting to interview you. And so a friend of ours who's a psychologist, I asked her, what are some questions that you would ask that you would ask a candidate for the U.S. House? And she said, I would ask, what are you most worried about? What worries you about the upcoming election, perhaps?
Yeah.
What worries you about where things seem to be headed in the short and long term? What keeps you up at night politically?
Yeah. Well, we've talked around a lot of those issues already, I would say. And I am persuaded that the dangerous and terrible things that Republicans are doing, there will be a political cost to that. And I hope that Democrats are ready, willing, and able to make that argument and stand up to it and then win the elections in the midterm elections. I worry about the Democrats sometimes, right? Like, I'm not sure that sometimes our leadership is where it is. I certainly think we can do better in this district, which is why I'm doing this. So that does worry me. And if we aren't able to persuade Americans that what's happening right now is dangerous and wrong and is eroding the fundamentals of our country and is bad for your pocketbook because of all these reasons, if we aren't able to make that case, I worry about the long-term, trajectory of the country, and I worry about the ability of us to pass on to the next generation a country that's thriving and has room for everybody and opportunities for people to thrive and succeed. I guess that's like the big thing, that is the big thing. Yeah. I have all sorts of other things to worry about, in my life and in this endeavor. But man, that is the thing that we should all be kept up at night about.
Yeah. On the other hand, what excites you about the coming election and legislative opportunities? What excites you in the coming days?
Yeah. There is just going to be this wreckage after this administration. All over the place. Healthcare, for one, but even something like USAID, right? Or our foreign, just how people perceive this country in the world. Bureaucratic things about how the VA is run. That's going to be radically understaffed as a result of what they're doing. And we talked a little bit about this, but that actually, it does provide some opportunity, right? There's a chance to actually get some really important things done that maybe the space wasn't there for that in the past. I think you start to feel that sense already. You see it expressed, I think, even in this desire to have new people and new perspectives, and that I'm sort of sensing when I talk to people. And I think that what comes after this could be really good. It could actually provide us a real opportunity to make this country something we're really proud of, even more proud of than I already am, and something that works for people.
Awesome. Okay, we have about a little over a minute left.
Oh, wow.
I want to ask you I told you it would go fast.
Yeah.
So there's been the big word in Democratic primary politics these days is gerontocracy, right? The question of whether our leadership is just plain too old. And on a personal level, I feel that it is very acceptable to have elderly representatives.
I agree.
We have a lot of elderly people in our country, and they deserve a voice.
Yes.
They deserve to be represented. So, for me, maybe the question isn't really about the age of people so much as it is about how willing they are to shake things up, how willing they are to really fight for things, including their own seats. So I'd like to hear your take on the question of new leadership and how we get there.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I appreciate that talking about that need for new leadership. It can slip for sometimes people into a concern about ageism, and I do not believe that. I think that people who are in advanced years have so much to contribute to this country, right? And they are. What I'm talking about is that need to shake things up, is the need for different thinking about these real challenges, and this concept that maybe the approach that made a ton of sense a couple decades ago just isn't suited to the challenges of today. And can you bring that mindset to governance? Can you bring that mindset to representation? I think it's healthy not to have people who are of a certain age in government, but to have change over time, to have people come in and out of government that represent different perspectives. Sometimes generational perspectives, or sometimes not, just a different perspective, and not just sit on a seat for decades and decades. And I also think it's appropriate to ask, okay, if you've been there for this period of time, what have you accomplished? And what's gotten done? And what are you proud of? And what can you come back to? And is there someone else who can maybe take a different approach to it, right? That's how I'm thinking about this. It's certainly not that there's some arbitrary cutoff or people who are older don't have something to contribute. That's just not the case.
Patrick Roath, thank you so much for coming on the show.
This is great.
Thank you. This has been lots of fun.
Yeah.
And I hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, let's do it again. Love it. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
In my new role as a producer on Public Access, I wanted to say that I have reached out to the other candidate in this race so far, Representative Stephen Lynch. I reached out to their campaign a couple of weeks ago, and I have not yet heard back from them, except insofar as they did add me to their mailing list.
Come on, sugar. Woo. Come on.